Scary story. Abandoned government. The rusted gate creaked open like a skeletal jaw, groaning a welcome to the intrepid, or perhaps, foolish, souls who dared to trespass. The sign, barely legible beneath layers of peeling paint and a tapestry of rust, offered a single, ominous word: authorized personnel only. For Liam, Maya, Chloe, and Ben, the sign was less a warning and more an invitation. They were urban explorers, thrill-seekers who documented the forgotten corners of the world, and the abandoned Blackwood Research Facility was their holy grail. Liam, the de facto leader, was a meticulous documentarian, his camera always at the ready, capturing every crumbling wall, every decaying piece of equipment. Maya, the historian of the group, devoured information, piecing together the stories behind the places they explored. Chloe, the daredevil, was always eager to push the boundaries, her adrenaline-fueled energy a counterpoint to Liam's caution. And Ben, the tech guy, was invaluable, his skills in breaking locks and navigating complex systems crucial to their explorations. They had driven for hours, the road dwindling into a barely-there track that snaked its way through a dense, primeval forest. The facility, according to their intel, was a government black site, shut down decades ago under a cloud of secrecy. Rumors of unethical experiments and the disappearance of personnel had swirled for years, fueling the curiosity of amateur investigators and urban explorers alike. As they drove through the gate, the forest closed in around them, the sunlight struggling to penetrate the thick canopy. The air grew cold, the silence broken only by the crunch of tires on the gravel road and the pounding of their own hearts. The facility itself was a sprawling complex of concrete buildings, their windows like vacant eyes staring out at the world. The exterior was heavily damaged, with sections of roof missing and walls scarred by the ravages of time and neglect. The place reeked of decay, a potent cocktail of rust, mildew, and something else. Something metallic and acrid that clung to the back of their throats. Liam parked the car a safe distance from the main entrance, his camera already clicking. "All right, people," he said, his voice a little too loud in the oppressive silence. "Let's be careful out there. We don't know what we're going to find." Chloe, already halfway out of the car, grinned. "Don't worry, Liam, I'll keep you safe." Ben, ever the pragmatist, was already fiddling with a lockpick. "Let's get this show on the road. I've heard the security systems here were top-notch, even for the time." Maya, her face alight with anticipation, grabbed her notepad and pen. "I've been reading up on Project Chimera. This place, it's going to be fascinating." They breached the facility through a side entrance, bypassing a broken security panel. The air inside was even colder and more stale than the air outside, and the smell of decay was overpowering. The interior was a labyrinth of corridors, laboratories, and offices, all in a state of utter disrepair. Equipment lay scattered across the floors, covered in dust and debris. Files and documents were strewn everywhere, offering tantalizing glimpses into the facility's dark secrets. They quickly discovered that Maya's research was accurate. Project Chimera, it turned out, was a series of experiments aimed at creating hybrid creatures, combining human DNA with that of various animals. The goals were vague, but the implications were terrifying. They found lab journals detailing gruesome procedures, the forced impregnation of human volunteers, the systematic mutilation of animals, and the creation of monstrous hybrids, some vaguely human, others utterly alien. The scientists, driven by ambition and a callous disregard for life, had pushed the boundaries of science to their breaking point. "This is unbelievable," Liam murmured, his camera clicking furiously, capturing every detail. "They were actually doing this." Maya, her face pale, shook her head. "It's worse than I imagined. They weren't just experimenting, they were creating abominations." As they moved deeper into the facility, they began to encounter more disturbing evidence. They found cages and holding cells, some of which were clearly designed for creatures far larger than any human. They discovered a surgical theater, stained with blood and littered with surgical instruments, where the most horrific procedures had undoubtedly taken place. "This place is evil," Chloe said, her usual bravado faltering. "We should get out of here." Ben, who had been working on the facility's main computer system, finally managed to access some of the data. "I've got something," he said, his voice strained. "A list of personnel, research notes, and security footage." He managed to retrieve a few short clips, depicting scenes of the scientists performing their experiments. The footage showed the creatures, the hybrids, in various stages of development. Some were grotesque combinations of human and animal features, others were almost entirely alien, their forms defying easy categorization. As they watched the footage, they noticed something else. One of the scientists, a drive, Albright, appeared to be obsessed with one particular hybrid, a creature that was partially human, partially canine. It was intelligent, showing signs of understanding and, strangely, a capacity for affection. "This drive, Albright," Maya said, her voice filled with curiosity. "He seems different." "Yeah," Liam agreed. "He's the only one who seems to have any sort of connection to these things." Ben continued to delve into the system, uncovering more and more information. He discovered that the facility had been abruptly shut down, with the scientists and the creatures left behind. The official explanation was a malfunction, but the files suggested something far more sinister. They were ordered to shut down the project, Ben said, his voice low. And then, they disappeared. All of them. Scientists, creatures, everyone. Disappeared. Chloe asked, her voice trembling. Where did they go? That's what I'm trying to find out, Ben replied. As they continued their exploration, the facility seemed to grow more oppressive, the shadows lengthening, the silence becoming more profound. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was lurking in the darkness, observing their every move. They reached a large, secure laboratory, marked with multiple warning signs. The door was reinforced steel, but Ben, with his skills, was able to bypass the locking mechanism. Inside, they found a scene of utter chaos. Equipment was overturned, windows were broken, and the air was thick with the smell of blood. In the center of the room, they found a large, metal containment cell. The door was open. What the hell happened here? Chloe asked, her voice filled with dread. Liam stepped forward, his camera raised. This is it. This is where they kept the best of them. They entered the cell cautiously, their senses on high alert. They expected to find some evidence of the creatures, some indication of what had transpired. Instead, they found nothing. The cell was empty. Then, they heard it. A low growl, coming from the shadows. They turned and saw it. A figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light. It was tall and gaunt, with long, spindly limbs and a distorted face. Its skin was a sickly gray, and its eyes glowed with an eerie, phosphorescent light. It was the creature, the hybrid, the canine human. And it was furious. Run! Liam yelled, his voice filled with terror. They turned and fled, scrambling back through the laboratory and into the corridor. The creature pursued them, its footsteps echoing in the silence. It moved with unnatural speed, its long limbs propelling it forward with terrifying grace. They ran through the labyrinthine corridors, their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew that they were being hunted. They tried to find their way back to the entrance, but the facility seemed to shift and change around them, the corridors twisting and turning, leading them deeper into the darkness. They found themselves in a vast, underground chamber, filled with rows of cryogenic chambers. The air was frigid, the silence almost absolute. They knew that this was where the facility's true horrors had been kept, that this was where the scientists had stored their most dangerous creations. The creature was still pursuing them. They could hear its growls, its footsteps, getting closer and closer. They had to find a way to escape. They had to find a way to survive. Ben, ever the pragmatist, saw a small, service tunnel at the far end of the chamber. Over there, he yelled, pointing, we can try to get out through there. They ran towards the tunnel, dodging the cryogenic chambers, the creature hot on their heels. They reached the tunnel, but it was narrow and cramped, and they had to squeeze through it one by one. Chloe, ever the daredevil, went first, followed by Liam. Maya was next, and Ben was bringing up the rear. As Ben was about to enter the tunnel, the creature lunged at him, its claws extended. Ben barely managed to evade the attack, but the creature's claws tore a deep gash across his back. Go, go, Ben yelled, his voice filled with pain. The others pushed him forward, urging him into the tunnel. Ben, bleeding and injured, reluctantly complied. As they crawled through the tunnel, they could hear the creature outside, its heavy breathing and frustrated growls. The tunnel was dark and claustrophobic, and the air was thick with dust and the stench of decay. They crawled for what seemed like an eternity, their bodies aching, their spirits flagging. Finally, they reached the end of the tunnel. They emerged into a small, storage room, filled with boxes and crates. They were exhausted and injured, but they had survived. For now, they had to find a way out of the facility. They had to find a way to escape the creature. They searched the room, desperately looking for an exit. They found a small window, but it was boarded up. Liam, ever the resourceful one, started ripping at the boards. He had to get them out. As he was working, they heard it. The creature, its footsteps approaching, its growls growing louder. They knew that it had found them again. Quick, Chloe said. There's a door over here. They ran to the door, but it was locked. Ben, despite his injuries, tried to pick the lock. The creature was almost upon them. They could hear it scraping at the door, trying to get in. Ben finally managed to unlock the door. They burst through it and found themselves in another corridor. They ran, desperately seeking a way out. They heard a noise, a whimper. They followed the sound and found a small, metal door at the end of the corridor. They opened the door and found themselves in a small, bare room. In the center of the room, they found a single bed and a small table. And sitting on the bed, its head bowed, was the creature. It looked at him, its glowing eyes filled with an emotion that was both terrifying and heartbreaking. It was Dr. Albright, or, rather, what was left of him. He had been subjected to the experiments, transformed into the very creature he had helped create. You shouldn't be here, he said, his voice a raspy whisper. You have to leave. Why? Liam asked, his voice trembling. Because it's not safe, Albright said. It's not safe anymore. What do you mean? Albright looked at him, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. The facility, it's been compromised, he said. Something else is here, something more dangerous than me. What? Albright looked away. I don't know what it is, but it's not from here. Is it the reason the others are gone? Albright nodded. They are dead, but it is much worse now. Then they heard it. The sound of the entire building shaking, a low rumble that grew to a deafening roar. Something was moving through the walls, something vast and powerful, something beyond their comprehension. Albright's eyes widened with terror. It's here, he whispered. It knows you're here. Then, the walls of the room began to crack, and the creature's claws were able to tear though, leaving the room open to the outside world. The creature looked at him, his eyes blazing with a primal fury. The original, far more terrifying creature was now at the forefront. It raised its claws, and its shrieking echoed through the corridors, as it prepared to hunt. Run, Albright cried, before it was too late. They ran. There was no other choice. As they fled, they heard Albright's screams. They were the last sounds that they heard before they lost consciousness and never woke again. The facility fell silent, waiting for the next group of explorers to come. It wasn't exactly a nightmare that woke her, but rather the absence of sound. Not the gentle absence of quiet sleep, but a hollow, ringing nothingness that clawed at the edges of consciousness. Olivia, years removed from the horrors of Blackwood, bolted upright in bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. The small coastal town she now called home, nestled far from the Appalachian Mountains, was usually a symphony of ocean waves and chirping insects. Tonight, there was nothing. She glanced at the clock, 3:07 a.m. The witching hour, some called it. Her dog, a scruffy terrier mix named Gus, normally slept soundly at the foot of her bed. Tonight, Gus was gone. Olivia tried to dismiss her unease as lingering trauma. She'd rebuilt her life, found a semblance of peace. But the feeling persisted, a cold dread that settled deep in her bones. She grabbed her phone. No signal. Power outage, maybe. But the town across the bay was lit up, a distant constellation against the black velvet sky. She walked to the window and peered out. The ocean was still, a mirror reflecting the starless sky. Too still. There wasn't a ripple, not a wave, not even the gentle sway of the boats in the harbor. Then she saw it. A flicker of movement on the beach. A pale, distorted figure silhouetted against the darkness. It was walking towards the water. Olivia grabbed her coat and a flashlight, her hand shaking. She had to see what was going on. She slipped out of the house and walked towards the beach, the silence pressing in on her from all sides. As she approached the figure, she could make out more details. It was a woman, her body contorted into an unnatural pose, her face frozen in a mask of terror. She was walking stiffly, like a marionette controlled by an unseen hand. Olivia called out to her, but the woman didn't respond. She continued to walk towards the water, her footsteps barely audible on the sand. Olivia ran to her and grabbed her arm, pulling her back. The woman's skin was cold and clammy, her eyes vacant. Hey, are you okay? What's going on? Olivia asked, her voice trembling. The woman didn't answer. She simply stared at Olivia, her eyes wide and unblinking. Then, she spoke, her voice a raspy whisper that sent chills down Olivia's spine. They're coming, she said. Olivia frowned. Who's coming? Who are you talking about? The woman didn't answer. She broke free from Olivia's grasp and continued to walk towards the water. Olivia watched in horror as the woman waded into the ocean, her body slowly submerging beneath the still surface. She didn't struggle, she didn't cry out. She simply disappeared, swallowed by the darkness. Olivia stared at the water, her mind racing. What was happening? What was going on in her town? Then, she saw it. A disturbance in the water, a ripple that spread outwards from where the woman had disappeared. And then, a shape emerged from the depths, its form indistinct in the darkness. It was one of the creatures. The canine-human hybrid, the monster she thought she had left behind in the mountains. But it wasn't alone. It was accompanied by dozens, hundreds of other creatures, all emerging from the ocean, their glowing eyes fixed on the shore. They were coming for her. Olivia turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to warn the town. She had to protect them. But as she ran, she saw them. The townspeople, walking towards the ocean, their bodies contorted into unnatural poses, their faces frozen in masks of terror. They were being drawn to the water, compelled by an unseen force. Olivia realized that it was too late. The town had already been taken. She was the only one left. She ran to her house and barricaded the doors and windows. She grabbed a shotgun, a relic from her past life, and waited.